Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to give it another 30 seconds or so to catch any stragglers, and we'll get started. Okay, well, good afternoon again. My name is Chris Deeran, and I'm Director of Reform Scotland. I'd like to welcome you all to today's event, in which we'll be discussing the condition, the treatment, and the future of the nation's colleges. We spend a lot of time in politics and the media talking about education, but this tends to focus on schools and universities. And further education, for some reason, is seen as the Cinderella of the education sector, and I guess this is neither warranted nor healthy. Scotland's colleges are a key engine of our economy. They offer a significant tried and tested route out of poverty for people, and they're becoming more rather than less important in the modern economy. So just set the scene a little bit, maybe consider some of the facts. That the basics are that there are 24 colleges in 13 regions across Scotland, delivering around 71 million hours of learning to over 236,000 learners every year. They employ more than 14,000 staff and deliver around a quarter of all higher education in Scotland. And more than 8,500 students progress from college into university each year. Colleges are the biggest delivery agent of modern apprenticeships, supporting over 13,000 students. They work closely with schools to provide opportunities for young people and offering vocational pathways into careers. And 26% of school leavers go into further education from school, and that includes 36% from the most deprived areas. Colleges work in partnership with businesses to reskill and upskill the workforce. There are over 111,000 enrolments linked to industry. And the care sector, which is an industry that is only going to become more important as our society ages, has the highest number of enrolments linked to industry. A recent report from the Fraser of Allender Institute, and we'll hear more about this from Mary Spowage shortly, estimated that college graduates will improve Scotland's economy by £52 billion over their 40-year working lives. That will boost employment, increase real wages, and contribute to increased trade and investment. So colleges therefore play a vital role in providing people, particularly those from more disadvantaged areas, with the training, qualifications and life skills that can help them to succeed in life and make a valuable contribution to society. They're also important community hubs, even beyond the fact of the education that they provide. And they are, as the figures have shown, essential to our wider economic well-being. Despite all this, and despite constant promises to the contrary, we failed to deliver parity of esteem between colleges and universities. I feel like I've been hearing the phrase parity of esteem all my working life, which is quite a long time now. And yet we seem unable to take vocational, pragmatic, career-focused education as seriously as we should. Despite how successfully and impactfully this has been achieved in other countries, there are all sorts of examples of how a real focus on this can boost an economy and the general well-being of the population. Instead, our colleges have been subjected to what amounts to maybe neglect, relentless budget cuts, often excluded from the national education conversation or relegated to a minor part in it. They're seen by too many as a place for people who don't get the grades for uni, rather than as a smart and viable alternative route to a fulfilled life and an engaging career. I think we might take the point that this neglect is now reaching a crisis point, and the threat is real. A significant reduction in the range of courses provided is on the cards, in student capacity, and the jobs being provided, and perhaps even the closure of some colleges altogether. So these issues and what a better future might look like are what we are going to discuss today. We have an expert panel to help us do this. Each of them is going to give an opening statement, and then we'll move on to questions among us. And then we'd like to hear your points and questions. And it's really important that we hear from you today. I can see from the audience we've got, there's a lot of expertise in there. And this should be a conversation because we want to make progress on this and hear from voices outside of the panel. So first today, we're going to hear from Joanna Campbell, who is Principal and Chief Executive of Dumfries and Galloway College and Chair of the College Principals. She will talk in greater detail about what college is, what colleges do, what impact colleges have in terms of skills, society and community. After that, we'll have Mary Spowage, Director of the Fraser Allender Institute, who I think this is either her second or third event of the day, so she's in full event monster mode. And she's going to discuss the work she and her colleagues have done in exploring the impact that colleges have on our economy and what more could be achieved. And finally, Andy Whitty, who's Director of Strategic Policy at Colleges Scotland, will explore the current financial reality, the impact on people and places, and also look ahead to the future and the potential and nature of reform. So we'll start with that. As I say, let me know using the Zoom app if you want to. There's a little toggle where you can send messages. If you've got a question you want to raise or a point you want to make, you can message the general group, or you can send me one directly, and we'll take the best of them and allow you to make your point to the audience and the panel. So to begin, I'm going to hand over to Joanna for your opening remarks. Joanna.
Thank you, Chris, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm Joanna Campbell. I'm the Principal at Dumfries and Galloway College, and it's lovely to be on the panel. And I have to say, in spite of everything that you've said there in your opening remarks, Chris, I'm actually an optimist. I've worked in the sector a long time, and I've seen the peaks and troughs over the years. So I want to start this by saying that although we have all these challenges, there is a lot to be positive about. So just to build on some of the stats that you gave there, Chris, I think it's important to outline more detail around some of the different types of learning that you emphasised there. So actually 13% of our provision is school-college partnership, which is quite a significant number. And actually 50% of our qualifications are involved in, a skill, and it might be that you're learning to be a plumber, or it might be you're training for the Merchant Navy, for example. And then 23% of our provision, which is HNC, HND level qualifications, is actually equivalent to the first and second year of university. And that's a point I'll come back to in a wee minute or two. We are, as you've rightly said, involved in what we call lifetime learning, so upskilling and retraining to meet local economic need. We've done that predominantly in the last number of years using the Flexible Workforce Development Fund, which of course comes from the apprenticeship levy. And that's a big concern for us because that tap is about to be switched off in next year's budget. We've been pushing quite hard for reinstatement of that, and that's been the college sector along with employers as well. We're agile, we're flexible, and really we're powerhouses in the sense that we're real drivers of change with measurable outcomes and impacts. One of the challenges that we face is the overlaps in what we do. So if you look at the learner journey from the fourth, fifth and sixth year of school through to university, there's overlap between the senior phase of the school and what the college sector does. And then if you look at the first and second year of university, that there's an overlap with what we're doing there. So from our sense, we recognise that, and there's an inequality in the way in which we're funded, particularly for that HNC, HND level provision. If I move on, I just wanted to share that the college sector is more than just delivery of curriculum. It's actually what we would call the backbone of Scotland's economy. We talk about the college sector having a dual purpose. The first of that is really supporting national and regional economies to grow, and ultimately supporting Scotland's national strategy for economic transformation. If I give you an example from my own college, we're heavily involved in addressing one of the greatest challenges of our lifetime, and that's tackling the climate change. We've, as a college, embedded sustainability into our college culture. We have a climate change charter that's signed up to by the staff, the students and the board, and really we're working towards our ambition as an institution to be net zero by 2030. We also offer a whole range of training around that theme, and we also work very closely with local employers and a whole raft of activity in and around that. It's important to also point that we have national agencies that support the sector in some of our endeavours in net zero. So, for example, the Energy Skills Partnership, and also another organisation which supports universities and colleges, which is EAUC. So in terms of, so the example that I've given you there is really just outlining one example of how we support priority policy areas from the government perspective. So the second purpose from a college sense is really about how we support and transform lives by widening access to opportunity. The students, after all, are why we do what we do. And I can say that I'm an alum of the college sector, and I certainly wouldn't be here presenting to you today if I hadn't, first of all, gone to my local college before I went to university. But in terms of where we are now with the sector, we're seeing a lot of the impact of the harms of COVID and working our way through the pandemic. We've also got cost of living crisis. Student poverty is at an all-time high. And actually some of the support that we provide as colleges to support student health and well-being is extremely challenging in a tight fiscal environment, but so necessary for our students. And we're seeing more and more of a requirement for that. So really, in terms of our dual purpose, I've covered that there. But if I move on then to the change and reforms that we've faced over the last number of years, as a sector, we've been through probably about 10 or 12 years of significant change, starting back in 2010 with the regionalisation of colleges, which resulted in mergers. We went from roughly 43 colleges to 26. We had changes to our governance arrangements. We were reclassified from a funding perspective, so we became not-for-profit bodies, which made the ability for us to plan for the long term significantly more challenging. And although regionalisation presented a number of challenges, it also meant that as colleges, we were more closely aligned to our college regions. I mentioned the pandemic there a wee moment ago. The pandemic actually afforded us opportunities to look at new ways of working. And, you know, all colleges have adapted well to that whole digitisation agenda that came as a result of the global pandemic. But obviously, as you would imagine, there are lasting impacts in terms of expectations, in terms of how students want to learn, how staff want to work, how business operations should continue on from that point. And then the last sort of significant change that we're facing at the moment is that piece around educational reform, which you actually touched on as well in your introduction, Chris. And the recent review of the independent review of the skills delivery landscape places colleges firmly at the centre of planning regional skills with local partners. And if I just remain with the last point that I made there, my college has been involved in one of 7 national pilots to look at regional skills planning that came about through a review that the Funding Council was led on. And what we've done through those Pathfinder programmes is we've worked with our regional partners here in the south of Scotland to test new ways of responding to priorities for the regional and national economy. And we have increased higher education provision as a result of one of those Pathfinder projects. And we have also mapped out and developed an interactive map for digital skills provision. And those are really great examples of how colleges respond to regional skills planning. So just finishing then, really just to say, despite all these reforms, we still continue to operate in a very cluttered landscape. We have multiple public agencies. We have competing and changing policy drivers, multiple funding streams, and a degree of short-termism in our funding arrangements. We live in uncertain times, and in order for the sector to thrive, we need to reverse the chronic underinvestment we've had in the last decade. So that's everything from me, and thank you for listening, and I'm going to pass back to you, Chris.
Chris, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I should know better by now. Joanna, I just want to come back to you on one thing. You have a national role, obviously, but you also are day-to-day running a college, and you talked about 12 years of reform. There are obviously all sorts of issues facing students. You talked about, issues of poverty, the rest. There's the issue of funding that you're dealing with. And I wonder what it's like to run a college day to day when you seem to be, and all the great things that are achieved, which I should have stressed at the start and didn't, my bad. But I just wonder what it's like and how you focus having to fight on all these fronts. If you like, it's probably not what you imagined when you went into this kind of job, that it would be quite as demanding and challenging and just so many fronts to head out on.
Yeah, there's no doubt the job has changed, particularly in the last 2 to 3 years. I've been a principal for just short of 5 years, and you know, I came into the sector because I had experienced it firsthand, and I wanted students to also, you know, me as a principal, and what I wanted was to be able to transform students' lives. But I would say in the day-to-day running of a college, that job becomes harder because we don't have the availability of funding to do everything that we want to do to support our students. And we have to make really difficult decisions about what can we do with the limited resource that we have and what we can't do. The other thing I would say about that is that actually, you know, it would be great for me and my college to be able to put on lots of different programmes to meet all the demand that we have. I'm in a situation where this college has waiting lists. We opened for applications a couple of weeks ago. We've actually got waiting lists for construction and engineering programmes. Not every college will be in that position, but it would be great if I could actually extend the number of places that I had available for people that want to do that. It's so important for our local economy, but I can't do that because I'm very restrained. So, you know, there's a limit on what we can do in terms of provision. There's a limit in how much support we can provide our students. And I've not even touched on the state of our crumbling college estate, because as I sit here, I have a leak in my roof. The bucket is not out today because thankfully it's not raining very heavily, but you know, you have to make choices, and it's important that the students and their experience don't suffer in those difficult choices that we make, but that's the harsh reality of what we do.
So it's really interesting. Thank you for that insight. I'll hand over to Mary now.
Thanks, Chris. So I just wanted to talk a bit about what we tried to do in the report, which was published in October, and you can see it and read all its glorious 40 pages for yourself and all the detailed analysis, including 2 additional technical annexes. But the purpose of the report was to some extent update some work we'd done with the college sector in 2017, I think, which tried to do some of this previously. So we wanted to update the work we'd done before, which was really looking at how do we understand and quantify the economic impact that the college sector has. And in that first report, what we were really looking at there was, what does it mean that we take these people and we give them additional skills and qualifications? You know, what additional value does that bring to the economy in the long run? So really, from a technical point of view, this comes down to sort of wage uplifts that people receive by having higher qualifications, which has a positive feedback loop on productivity in the economy in the long run. So we updated that analysis to the 5-year cohort up to 21-22, which results in the 52 billion figure that Chris mentioned. But just to put it in context for 1 year, if you look at the 21-22 cohort, the Funding Council, so through the Funding Council, the Scottish Government invested around 740 million in the college sector. And in the long run, you know, over a sort of 40-year working life, that would result in a sort of £8 billion boost to the Scottish economy, with a subsequent, obviously, boost as part of that to government revenues. So I guess those figures sort of demonstrate that if you invest in skills, people are likely to earn more money, and in the end are going to generate more activity and pay more tax. So it's a case for investment in skills, I suppose, that it's a sensible economic investment, and that you sort of more than get your money back in the long run in the size of the economy. And it's why governments all around the world do invest in skills, because it is important for you know, our long-term economic productivity. But as well as that analysis, we wanted to understand the impact that colleges have in their local economies. So as well as an employer and a provider of education, colleges are also a key part of the local supply chains. You know, they buy goods and services in the local economy and spend money. So as well as the jobs that are directly supported by the college sector, there are over 4,000 further jobs supported by colleges in all of the goods and services that they purchase in local communities. And we were quite struck by our discussions with colleges through our research, the extent to which colleges are obviously anchor institutions in their local areas. And in terms of the provision of education, it's very much providing it much more than universities do to students who might tend to be in their local area, and perhaps not able to, they would otherwise be able to access the sorts of facilities that colleges are able to provide. Finally, as well as those sorts of big bits of economic analysis, which we present in the report, we also wanted to discuss something that Joanna's already mentioned, which is the contribution that colleges can and should have to the National Strategy for Economic Transformation. Now, this we all know is now being reviewed. 10-year strategy is 2 years old, now it's been reviewed. Perhaps to demonstrate some of the issues that Joanna was talking about cluttered landscapes, and we certainly get frustrated about these sorts of strategy documents not not sort of being maintained for more than 5 minutes. But in terms of the overall pillars, I think they're hard to argue with. This is about the contribution of colleges to the skills we require in the economy, both today and crucially tomorrow. The contribution that colleges have to widening access and reducing regional and other types of inequalities. All of the data that we've analysed extensively in the report on widening access demonstrates that students from certain types of backgrounds with certain types of characteristics are supported much better by the college sector in order to achieve their potential. And this is all data that's published readily by the college sector, but we were hopefully able to sort of bring out the key points and to demonstrate those sorts of those trends in the report. So we discuss as well the role, not just in terms of supporting people to achieve their potential, but the role of colleges in supporting regional economic development and dynamism in the sort of regional way that colleges operate with other actors in a local area. Finally, you talked about parity of esteem, Chris, and it is a very fashionable phrase right now, particularly after the Withers review. One thing that I'd just like to finish on that we were struck by, which was the data about the sector. Now, some of the data that we needed for the report wasn't readily published and was quite hard to come by. And the Funding Council supported us and got us the data in the end that we wanted. But I think this is an issue for the sector, to be honest. It might sound like a technical point, but if it's not easy to kind of demonstrate what your impact is, the impact that you're having, I think it does make it more difficult in conversations when you're trying to point to evidence about the sorts of outcomes that you're supporting and the impact that you're having. So I do think that I know I would say this is somebody who analyses data, but I do think that that's something to think about for the sector, about how we can support better and more visible data on the sector so we understand its impact better.
Thanks for that, Mary. Just one question for you. We think about colleges sometimes as a destination for school leavers, but obviously they're much more than that. And actually upskilling and reskilling, given the changing nature of the economy, is getting much more important. And we've been talking about lifelong learnings, I guess, since the New Labour era, but it is a reality now. And many of us have had various different types of career and had to learn new skills and the rest of it. Could you just maybe put into perspective how important that aspect of someone who is perhaps mid-career or maybe early on but further into the path of their career or late in career and is looking for a change is to the future nature of our economy?
This is absolutely crucial, and nowhere is it more crucial than thinking about the opportunities presented by the transition to net zero, and the sorts of sectors that may well decline and those that may well grow to replace them. And no bit of the educational establishment is better placed to provide the place for that retraining than colleges are, not only because of their regional nature and presence, but also because they're just much more used to delivering this sort of education. I do think there's a potential in the education system to be more imaginative about how we deliver some types of retraining and upskilling. We've seen some instances of that outside the college sector, which have kind of gone by the wayside. But I do think there were some great initiatives during the pandemic and so on from some colleges about focusing on particular areas of skill. And, you know, I think that the college sector is the place that this can happen. And it really does need to, so that we skill up because the real limiter on taking the economic opportunities for net zero is not having the people with the right skills in the right place.
Right, okay, thank you for that. Okay, and finally, Andy Whitty, who's Director of Strategic Policy at Colleges Scotland. Over to you, Andy.
Hi, thanks, Chris, and good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here contributing, and I think we've had two great contributions so far around just the value of what colleges deliver for people, for learners, for the communities, and then for Mary around the economy. And that's why at Colleges Scotland is the representative body of all 24 colleges in Scotland. We have a strapline that when colleges thrive, Scotland thrives, because that is very clear and evident from what you've heard. But I need to start with reality. And the reality at the moment is that recent Audit Scotland report showed that there was an 8.5% real terms cut in funding to colleges over the last 3 years. And if you look ahead to the budget for the next academic year, which got passed yesterday, the challenge around that is just unpicking through the figures, but there is at least a 5% further reduction in funding for running the colleges. And so what you see is a picture where increasingly difficult choices and increasingly challenging choices are going to have to be made by colleges, and that's around the general running costs. In addition, Joanna mentioned the Flexible Workforce Development Fund, a hugely successful fund where colleges engaged with employers, and that has been cut as well. And so that's the reality. The reform that's happening, that's been mentioned already, is going to be key to that. There is a change in skills landscape. We've had the Withers review mentioned, the review into the independent review into the delivery of skills. We've had a Harewood review into qualifications and assessment. The government itself has produced its purpose and principles. There's a whole load of change and reform going on, which is supported by the sector, because we recognise that those changes are needed to ensure sustainability. We haven't got that. We haven't got stability and we haven't got sustainability at the moment because of the reality of where we're at, which means that the hugely great work that colleges do for learners, the community, the economy, is at risk. Is not going to be delivering that upskilling and reskilling of people as they change careers. Is absolutely vital for the Scottish economy to flourish. And so we also want to see that learner experience really being excellent as well. And whilst Joanna might have a bucket in her room when it rains, I'm sad to say that it's not the only bucket that needs to be deployed across colleges in Scotland. And literally hundreds of buckets are in buildings across Scotland that are not even wind and watertight. Yet we're expecting to train up the modern workforce in that. So infrastructure is a real challenge. Of course, what happens in those buildings by the dedicated staff, by the colleges trying to work around and mitigate all of this, is hugely important things for learners, particularly those from maybe deprived backgrounds, those that are maybe getting another chance in life, those that are getting upskilled and reskilled because they're returning to the workforce or a changing career, either through choice or through force. The work that's being delivered to help people and to help place in Scotland is absolutely huge. And students deserve that great education. Students deserve that world-class education experience. And so looking ahead, the reality is there is a huge demand for learning, especially work-based learning, flexible learning, employers wanting to engage with colleges. And so we want to find that way through this parallel of current challenges, yet the reform does provide some opportunity there going ahead of how we secure that long-term future for colleges, how we secure that affordable learning for everyone, and to allow colleges to continue, as they always have done, enhance that community in which they're based, and ultimately drive benefits for the Scottish economy as well. So I'll leave my initial thoughts just there, Chris, and hand back to yourself.
Thank you. Andy, I know you've been thinking a bit about the future of the college sector and some of the reforms that might help, and we've talked a bit about resourcing, and everyone talks about resourcing. We've just been through a budget which has left every single part of, as far as I can tell, of the Scottish public estate talking about resourcing. Beyond resourcing, then, what are the sort of changes that you think you could see from government? I know this is a big question, but maybe you could focus in a bit on the priorities that you have that would give colleges a chance to thrive in the way that we've been talking about.
Yeah, there's probably a number of areas in which beyond investment it's needed. I think there needs to be a wider recognition of how colleges do impact on the three priorities of government around that community and opportunity and equality. Colleges not only deliver education, but they also answer some of the key policy drivers across government in other directorates, be it health, be it housing. Having people go through colleges, get that education, hold down that job, move on, also avert spend in other departmental areas as well. So I think it's looking at that wider recognition that colleges deliver. I think it's seeing colleges first as what they can deliver, and that opportunity for that wider opportunity for everybody to be able to engage in college, at least at some point through their life. I think we need to also look at the structure and the flexibility to allow colleges to make the decisions they need to make at a regional level to address the skill needs of that region, and to be able to engage with the employers within that region. And so that freedom and that flexibility to deliver that training need, I think, is also a really key element of the future.
It's just listening to you there, it sounds a bit like one of the arguments you often hear for spending in the NHS, which there's a preventative argument to, if you spend on stopping people from going into hospital, then you have to spend less on treating them in hospital. If you spend on sending people to college and upskilling people in college, then the consequences for, I guess, the other aspects of the state spend are there. And actually, Mary, I wonder if I could come back to you on that, on the issue of resource, because as I say, we've had a budget that doesn't seem to have pleased anyone, and everyone's complaining about their shoes pinching their feet. Taxes have risen. They're comparatively high when we look at the rest of the UK. Not sure they can go much higher, or that there's an appetite to put them much higher. And yet, of course, we still have all sorts of competing priorities and cuts left, right, and centre. And colleges are only one of the areas that are feeling the pinch on these things. Where does this leave us?
Yes, it's not a pretty picture, and as you say, despite further rises in income tax, and despite the fact now that for anyone above the median income anyway, you're now paying more tax than you would if you were in the rest of the UK, and the higher income goes, the more that differential increases. We're in very sort of straitened fiscal times. And some of that outlook, most of our budget is still determined by what's spent at Westminster. That's true. And so the tight decisions, particularly on capital, the outlook on capital in particular is very, very tight. It's like the tightest I could ever remember. And so that's having consequences on all parts of the public sector, even on health, which is generally, been quite protected from the tightening up of budgets. And any impact on local authority budgets impacts on pretty much every area of government spending in some way or another, because they have responsibility for roads and other things that impact on other bits of the public sector. So yeah, it's really difficult. I mean, the government obviously had the option not to freeze council tax and allow local government the flexibility to put it up as far as they felt they needed to for the needs in their local areas. We know the council tax is regressive, but so is freezing it in a way. So it's a very difficult time, and it is very tight fiscally. There's no doubt that the Scottish Government had difficult choices to make. But they have made choices. They have, over the last few years, chosen to prioritise health and social security spending and squeezed in other areas, and those are the choices that they have made. But it isn't, when the Deputy First Minister says they're making very difficult decisions, it is absolutely true that they're making very difficult decisions.
Okay. Joanna, maybe coming back to that hackneyed old phrase, parity of esteem, but I do wonder why Scotland, because we do talk about this a lot, why Scotland's failed to take colleges and the vocational pragmatic skills and career focused education they offer as seriously as we should. And I'm drawn again to the Withers report, where he talked about the importance of the language that we use. And I know this is a commentator that the choice of words and phrasing that we make does an awful lot to define how we think and talk about issues. And I wanted to quote from the Withers report just at a little bit of length, because I think this is possibly crucial. Structures and languages matter, because in practice, how systems work and the way we talk about them can reinforce stigma or serve to counteract their intended aims or purpose. Close attention to language and structures are therefore fundamental to achieving parity of esteem, by which I mean a shared acknowledgement that different pathways are simply different, not better, not worse, just different. In other words, and to be blunt, I want to consign to the dustbin the outdated view that studying at university is somehow a better kind of success. It's undoubtedly something to be celebrated. However, there are multiple potential pathways available addressing different learning approaches using different contexts to provide experience. Currently, the distinction made between educational and vocational routes is outdated, has perpetuated a lack of collaboration between key public sector institutions, and is hampering the coherence of Scotland's post-school learning system. When you put all that together, it sort of really makes the case to get a grip of this, and whether it's about language, but also about structure and about concentration on putting these things together and having a much greater clarity about what we're trying to achieve and the important factors in them. Why is it that we haven't done this? Why do we not have parity of esteem when it seems so central to the future of the workforce and the present condition of the workforce?
Yeah, I think there's something about that lived experience of our decision makers and policy makers. And, I mean, my route into the workplace was initially, I thought I would go to university, but I didn't. I went to college. And what I hear is people are making deliberate decisions to come to college because they want to get that technical expertise before they then go on and do the bolt-on. We have excellent articulation arrangements with a number of our universities, so you can go straight in quite a number of qualifications. You can go straight from HND into third year of a university provision. And a lot of people choose to do that because they recognise that the college actually offers them more support. You've got smaller cohorts of students. But in terms of parity of esteem, I think probably from our perspective, it's trying to break down that thinking around colleges seen as a sort of lesser choice, lesser option when you're making your decisions in school as to where you want to go. Certainly some of the feedback that we get from our apprenticeship cohorts is that younger people, I say younger, I was going to say young, but then I feel terribly old when I say that. But certainly what we're hearing from them is they want to get into the workplace and start to earn as quickly as they can. They don't want to be, acquiring student debt. And obviously in Scotland, students here are in a better position than they are in the other parts of the UK, but they don't want to have huge amounts of student debts. And actually, in a number of our apprenticeship programmes, our apprentices are quite canny in the sense that they know if they get that apprenticeship, they go out into the workplace, there will be opportunities for them to then go on. I'm thinking of engineering here. There are opportunities for them to then go back and do bolt-on to then get their MEng or whatever, and it will put them in a preferential position. So I think going back to your initial question, the parity of esteem, I think, is as much to do with our culture as it is to do with anything else. But I see that we're starting to change some of that. Certainly in the last 5 to 6 years, I've seen a difference.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, I just want to say to people in the audience, I can bore on for the next half hour. I've got loads of questions, but I'd much rather hear from you and hear your questions and the points you want to make. There's a few starting to come in the meeting group chat, so please contribute, and we'd like you to ask some questions of the panel as well. Andy, the Audit Scotland report that was referred to earlier, there's some alarming things in there beyond the national picture, some specifics. So I saw that Glasgow Kelvin College has indicated it may need to reduce its workforce by 21% from 22-23 to 24-25. Ayrshire College produced a particularly gloomy set of financial projections that found it may need to lose 70% of its staff over a 5-year period, which would suggest it would inevitably lead to closure. Others are talking about compulsory redundancies. How real is this crisis, and what is the kind of level of existential threat to some colleges and the sector in general?
Yeah, where you see those individual examples given, I won't touch on those because it actually shows that broader picture of what's happening to the college sector. But I would say some of those are from scenario planning, which is a very sensible management approach within colleges, and so some of those would have just been one of several scenarios that were produced. But when I look across the whole of the college sector, I do see this increasingly challenging moment that the college sector finds itself in. And despite the evidence and the knowledge of all the great things that colleges do, the importance it is for the Scottish economy, for training up the workforce, then we are still, as a sector, facing real challenges around those funding cuts and that lack of investment. There is reform has been mentioned. The challenge around reform is that needs investment in order to drive that change, and we're looking at a period of time now where we're trying to reform and trying to get that stability and sustainability back into the sector at a time where there's reducing funding as well. And so, yeah, it's a real challenge that colleges face for dealing with their day-to-day running costs, and it's a real challenge colleges face with the condition of their estate and buildings.
Okay. I know that the minister in charge of this sector has spoken in recent months of a colleges first approach. I wonder what that means. What does it look like in practice, and how would that improve things over the current system? Now, any of you could come in on that, really, but maybe.
I'm happy to kick off on that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's an element around mindset and language around colleges first. I think it's about ensuring that not just the minister you referred to, but his ministerial colleagues recognise the opportunities that training in the public sector, there should be a default position of considering colleges first for public training, and can that be delivered that way from right across the public sector? There's areas around looking at apprenticeship funding and the best and the most appropriate route to make that as most efficient as it can be. And again, it's that sense of colleges first for the delivery. I already heard some of the statistics around apprenticeship delivery, and I think some of those make some real key elements. But use of our buildings as well. Despite the conditions of some of them, there are buildings all over Scotland, and there's a way of public buildings of how they're utilised to the maximum through other services that could share those as well. And so I think it's just around that whole change in the emphasis and focus to think about, actually, colleges are not just there for somebody else's kids. colleges are there to deliver a whole load of other stuff and positives elements, both in education and some of the wider areas as well. So I'll pause. Others, I'm sure, will want to contribute their thoughts on that.
I'm going to move on to audience questions in a minute, but Joanna, I just wanted to come back to you on one point. I know that colleges give holistic support to students as they study, and you know, Mary McCallum, the Economy Secretary, was talking the other day about some of the mental health issues that we have in society and how helping people back into work is going to benefit them as well as benefiting the rest of us, giving people purpose and engagement and a degree of hope, I suppose. Can you tell us a bit about what holistic support looks like in the college system? And maybe we keep hearing about mental health issues rising post-lockdown amongst our young people, but also amongst people of different ages. Is that something you've noted at your own college and elsewhere?
Definitely. And so I'll start with that point, actually. In terms of the support for mental health and well-being, we have seen an increase in that as we've come out of the pandemic, because let's remember that the students that we have that are coming into the college sector now, they've spent a significant amount of time in their bedrooms studying school, you know, for hires or Nat 4s, Nat 5s. So there's a whole sort of aspect of socialization, learning how to learn, and we have to almost start from further behind where we would have in a number of years gone by. There's also you know, there's that whole trauma-informed piece that we need to bear in mind when students come into our colleges. We have lots of different initiatives that we can do to try and support students in that health and wellbeing, whether it be counselling support. So we received money for student counsellors. We've been able to utilise that. You know, that isn't a long-term source of funding for us, but we've been able to demonstrate the value of having that. We've put on lots of different services to support cost of living and student poverty. So, for example, I see that Jackie's on the call from West Lothian College. They've done some phenomenal things in that area, whether it be having washing facilities for their students to use on campus. We've put on free breakfasts. I know most colleges do that now. We've got free lunches as well. We have food banks. We have looked at different discounts that we can offer with local businesses to try and make sure that students, you know, can make what limited resource that they have got go even further. And, you know, and the student associations are really driving a lot of that going forward. So, you know, from that perspective, I think colleges have really stepped up to meet the challenges that we've been experiencing from our student cohort. The other thing I was going to say about wraparound support, we actually have done for as long as I can remember, we offer careers advice and guidance. And a really important point to make in that respect is that most of our lecturers have come in with experience of having worked in industry. So who better to hear from in terms of the industries that the students are studying to go out and work in than people who've actually worked in those industries. So they can tell you exactly what it's like to be a nurse, or, you know, to be a carer out in the community, or to work in the oil and gas industry, or, you know, so that's probably the best careers advice and guidance that you're going to be able to give those students who want to then go on and you know, seek careers in those areas. So I've only really touched on, you know, a bit of what we do. There is so much more. So yeah, hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, thank you for that. And Jackie Galbraith, I hope we can hear from you in a bit, because you've been contributing quite a bit, and I'd like to hear your thoughts in general in the conversation. But first, I wondered if Richard Marsh, who's made an interesting point, might like to make that on the microphone, if you're there, Richard.
Yeah, briefly, I was to say, yeah, I know employers make contributions already through various systems, but the conversation we've had so far is to say we understand there are cuts from Scottish Government funding. There have been some reductions from employers towards the system too. So I think the Withers report touched quite lightly upon exploring other mechanisms by which employers could contribute to things that are maybe not well served within the current system. So I wondered if that was something that might go even a limited way towards helping the resources needed.
Mary, I'd like to come to you on that, because I suppose given the restraints we're operating under, I keep hearing suggestions about, you know, closer involvement with for business with colleges, but also with universities, with schools. You know, if you want the workforce that you want, then help it to be formed. Do you think that's a viable approach in future, something that we can upscale, if you like?
Yeah, absolutely. Every big business that I've talked to in the last year, the first thing that they're struggling with is getting the skilled staff that they need, where they need them to be. And many of them are taking things into their own hands in terms of, you know, recruiting people at a lower level of skill than in the past, and training them up, and taking the risk that they might then get pinched by one of their competitors who are looking for the same sorts of people. But I've heard some quite, you know, privately quite positive noises from pretty big businesses about, you know, wanting to be part of the solution here to ensure that Scotland can thrive, and particularly when we're talking about taking the opportunities around the transition. And that isn't just about young people going into their career or coming out of school. It is about, you know, how we think about retraining and reskilling, you know, people, and that sort of lifelong learning journey. Because I mean, I know you said lifelong learning's been about since for ages, but it hasn't been very fashionable, it would seem, in the last few years to talk about it. But in terms of what colleges do, I think it's really important to revive it as that this is the role that they play. You know, it isn't further education. You know, colleges provide, you know, it's supporting school education. It's providing routes into university for some. It's providing higher education in some cases, and it's providing that, you know, education which is orientated to the economic needs of a local area to ensure that, you know, employers have the skilled staff that they need. So I think businesses are up for this, to be honest, and certainly in some conversations I've been with policymakers, I think there is an opportunity here, after all of these reviews of the skills system, to do something a bit more imaginative with businesses involved.
Mm-hmm. And Andy, you know, you've been thinking about the future. Is that something you see as playing a significant part in, especially in a time of restricted resources? But actually, it makes a whole bunch of sense if we're moving into a much more skills-focused era for employers to have a conversation with the educational providers about the kind of courses they're offering, the people they're producing, helping fund these things, and ensuring that everything has a sort of circularity to it.
Yeah, I mean, it was touched on in the Withers review around the contribution across the board of employers into education. I mean, all colleges work strongly with local employers. There is some great interactions and relationships there. Some of those contributions are already happening. But the statistics tell us that as a whole, as a nation, there's less contributed as a proportion by employers than in other developed countries. And so there is something that could be tackled and looked at there to do it. I think we'd mentioned the Flexible Workforce Development Fund, and that's been cut. And I think one of the real short-term elements of that is that was really working to widen even more the engagement of colleges with employers in their local region. And so, as well as the direct monies available for training for those companies, it was starting to leverage in additional funding from employers as they engaged with the colleges, realized what could be offered, saw the advantages of the skills and the training for their staff. And so it was a leverage in for additional money. And so I think where people realize and see the benefits that colleges bring, then they're willing to engage. But I think generally we've got to try and see that increase. And I think it should be part of that picture of what provision looks as in the future.
Okay, thanks for that. Jackie Galbraith, you've been quite active on the chat forum. I wondered if you'd like to maybe give some reflection on what we've heard so far today.
Yeah, sorry, I can't put my camera on because I've got problems with Wi-Fi. I think just to reinforce the points that have been made about colleges do this. I mean, you know, it's really difficult. The Flexible Workforce Development Fund being withdrawn as a challenge. But companies already pay many colleges for training, and some are already starting to pay us in the absence of the Flexible Workforce Development Fund. And also there's other ways that we do it. So locally, our local council, West Lothian Council, has given the college £100,000 to do our own version of the Flexible Workforce Development Fund for small businesses across West Lothian. I think the key thing is that, you know, we do all of that, and we do all of that in the context of helping people to get work. And just to give you a flavour of the college sector, last night I went home about 9 o'clock from the college because I was at a meeting with the local race community forum. There were hundreds of people in the college last night. Some of them were doing evening classes, mostly paid by their employers, on things like engineering, on care, on healthcare, etc. There was an event taking place in the evening between the college and one of the local universities for the students who are doing HNCs in engineering and computing, because they're planning to go to university next year. We deliver thousands of SVQs to people who are actually working at the moment in care homes. So this happens all the time in colleges. The problem that we have with the withdrawal of the Flexible Workforce Development Fund and the cuts in funding that Joanna outlined, in order to craft more business, to develop more with companies, we're having to cut back on the resources that we have, and we have fewer and fewer people that can go out and actually spend time with businesses to talk about what we could do more of. So it's a wee bit of a double-edged sword there. We do so much already. We could do so much more, but this is at a time when we have to severely constrain our staffing resources. But I think it's really important people realise that colleges are big players when it comes to delivering work-based learning. And I know that my college isn't unusual, with a third of our provision is work-based provision. And I'm sure that most other colleges are the same. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Jackie. That's really, really useful. Ian Dunn, you've got a question which is worth posing, I think, because we're trying to be optimistic, and there's much to be optimistic about, but some of the data is rather alarming. Do you want to ask your question?
No, I agree. There's lots to be optimistic about, but the current model doesn't seem sustainable. In the short term, given the pressures on colleges and the kind of reluctance of government to fund the sector. So it feels like deep down people think, well, we need to do something radically different, but I don't see any vision or process for how we get to something radically different.
You make the point, you ask a bold question, how many Scottish colleges will exist in their current form in 2030? Now, we'd like to say all of them, maybe more of them, but realistically, given some of the projections we've seen from Audit Scotland and some of the restraints and the buckets that are being put out there, do you think there is the prospect of more rationalisation, Joanna, to come? So I'm going to throw that one at you. There you go.
Oh, that's a naughty
grenade
question to ask me. Well, I'm just going to give you a naughty response then. If we get the investment that we need, then that will not be a problem for us. But I say that flippantly, it's a really serious question, actually. I mean, if you look at recent reportage that we've had, the liquidity in the college sector is, in days in some cases, as opposed to months. It's very, very different to the university sector. The Audit Scotland report outlined that one of the biggest costs that we face is staff costs, sitting at 70% of our overall costs. That's challenging. We do our best to try and generate additional income through commercial training provision. I'm being optimistic here. I'm not being pessimistic. I think the shape and size may change it will change without that investment. But that's why it's even more important than ever for us to continue to express to government how important that investment in the college sector is. And actually, if you look at models that exist across the 4 nations, in Wales, they've gone through a review of post-16 funding, and the colleges are very much at the forefront of what happens in that post-16 space, and there isn't this overlap that I outlined in my opening remarks. So actually, I think if we can really focus in on a review of our post-16 funding, then that would go in many ways to resolve some of the issues that we're facing, and then we wouldn't be in a you know, we wouldn't be in a different situation in a sort of declining resource position.
And Mary, you at Fraser of Allender, you've obviously investigated things as they are, and the importance of the colleges that colleges have in the economy. What would the consequences be then of a further rationalisation, or colleges having to restrict the number of places that they're offering, or having to cut their staffing levels or the courses that they're able to offer? That obviously is going to have a negative impact on the figures that you've produced.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose from the government's perspective, it's all about where to spend money, limited amounts of money to get the biggest impact and the biggest bang for our buck. And I guess it's which parts of the education system are most geared to providing the skills that we require for tomorrow and for the opportunities that present us for the industries of the future. And as I've already said, you know, we do need to focus on lifelong learning, on reskilling, and also an important thing will be ensuring that people all across Scotland have access to the learning that they need, and that all people have the ability to fulfil their potential. Because one of the issues we have in Scotland is that there's so many people who are not working or not in the labour market because of ill health or disability, you know, or they feel far from the labour market, or rather the labour market is far from them. And part of the kind of ambition around the Scottish Government through things like employability has to be about upskilling and reskilling. We essentially have a lot of people in Scotland who potentially could work if they have the right support, and part of that is about the training that they need. So, you know, none of that's going to be realised if we don't have the right sort of provision in place and the right place for those people to ensure that they can fulfil their potential. So you know, it would certainly be concerning, but, you know, there is a limited budget. So the key thing for the government is to think about where they're going to get the biggest return on their investment, both socially and economically.
Okay, well, we're pretty much out of time, but I just want to give Andy the last word because he got to go last out of the three panelists. And Andy, let's have an end on a positive note. What does a thriving college in the future look like?
The thriving college of the future is providing routes out of poverty for people. It's providing that support for those that are finding challenges, be it around mental health or physical health. I think it's providing that widening access as the route. It's providing individuals with progress on their individual journeys that they're traveling, and it's around just ensuring that they can maximize their opportunity. It's skilling up and reskilling the workforce for Scotland. In the communities of which colleges are placed, and so it's helping learners, community economy, and ultimately that's why, as I say, the tagline for Colleges Scotland, representing all of the colleges, is, you know, when colleges thrive, Scotland thrives.
Okay, well, thank you for that, and thanks so much to the panel for some really interesting perspectives. I think there's a lot to be positive about, and also a lot to think about the challenges that are faced, both for the government, and I know there are people in the call from the government, in colleges themselves, but also at Reform Scotland. This is an issue that we take very seriously, and I think we would like to do more on it. And we'll continue to work with Colleges Scotland and Fraser of Allender and others. But if there are people in the call who would like to talk to us about this and about where we could usefully add ideas and research and pressure in places, please do get in touch. We're not hard to find. Yeah, so thank you for coming along. We'll do more on this in the future. I'm sure we'll do more events on it in the future. So keep an eye on this space, and we shall see you all soon. Thank you again to everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Chris, and all the presenters.
Thank you.
That was super.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, cheers.